I don't know anything.
A little bit about the Argentina situation. I know that it has hyperinflation.
Between 1995 and 2001, Argentina adhered to the convertibility plan, pegging the peso to US dollar. This policy aimed to control hyperinflation, but led to several macroeconomic challenges. During this period, Argentina GDP growth averaged 2.02 annually. However, the economy faced structural issues, including rigid labor market, high public sector spending, and overall currency that hindered export competitiveness. The fiscal deficit remained persistent, and external debt levels increased, leading to vulnerabilities in the face of global economic shocks. For instance, in 1998, Argentina's GDP contracted by 3.39%, and in 2001, it shrank by 4.41%.
The economic and political crisis in Argentina during 2001-2002 was a deep collapse of the market occurred before and after in the country's history, triggered by a prolonged recession, excessive debt, and a rigid exchange rate policy known as the convertibility plan. The crisis culminated in a sharp devaluation, a sovereign debt default, and an abrupt GDP decline that exceeded 16% in 2002. The imposition of the Corralito, which restricted bank withdrawals, plunged the country into a social crisis with unemployment rising above 20%, alongside massive protests that led into resignation of President Fernando de la Rúa and the succession of several presidents within a few weeks. Financial instability was accompanied by a deep institutional crisis and a rapid loss of economic well-being for a large portion of the population.
Following the 2001 and 2002 crisis, Argentina experienced a robust economic recovery from 2003 and 2007. The economy grew at an average rate of approximately 9%. This growth was driven by a combination of factors across the global of commodities market, particularly by a soybean and other agricultural exports, a competitive exchange rate following the devaluation, and a surge in domestic demand. Investment levels increased, unemployment decreased, and poverty rates declined. The government implemented structural reforms, including debt restructuring and fiscal consolidation, which bolstered investor confidence and facilitated access to international capital markets. For example, in 2003, the GDP growth was 9%, and in 2007 was 8.9%.
Between 2008 and 2011, Argentina experienced a period of economic expansion within the context of global recovery following the worldwide financial crisis. The government implemented active policies to control prices and regulate markets to contain inflation, as well as measures to promote domestic demand and unemployment. This period was characterized by solid GDP growth, although pressures of the balance of payments and certain macroeconomic imbalances began to emerge toward the end of the period. Price control aimed to manage inflationary pressures that were beginning to arise in a complex economic policy environment.
The period from 2012 to 2015 marked a slowdown in Argentina's economic growth. GDP growth averaged from around 2.7% annually. Contributing factors included rising inflation, currency controls, and widening fiscal deficit. The revaluation of the peso persistently affected export competitiveness, while domestic consumption remained a key growth driver. Investment levels stagnated, and structural issues such as energy, subsidy, and trade imbalances became more pronounced. The challenges led to reduced investor confidence and tightening of the external financial conditions. For instance, in 2014, GDP growth was 0.5%, and in 2015, it was 2.5%.
From 2016 to 2019, the government of Mauricio Macri, the Argentine economy experienced a shift toward the openings and structural adjustment. Currency controls were removed, prices were liberated, and efforts were made to stabilize the economy through the fiscal reforms and deficit reduction. However, this adjustment faced challenges such as exchange rate volatility, confidence crisis, persistent inflation, and negotiation with international creditors. Despite pro-market policies, the government suffered a recession, rising unemployment, and growing social discontent, culminating in Macri's defeat in 2019 elections.
The COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 led to a significant contraction in Argentina's economy. GDP shrank by approximately 9.9% in 2020. The pandemic exacerbated pre-existing economic vulnerabilities, including high-rate inflation, fiscal deficit, and external debt pressures. Government-imposed lockdowns disrupted by economic activity, leading to declines in industrial production, services, and trade. Unemployment rates rose, and poverty levels increased. The central bank implemented expansive monetary policies, including increased public spending and social assistance programs, to mitigate the economic downturn. For example, in 2020, the GDP contracted by 9.9%, and in 2021, it rebounded with a growth of 10.4%.
During 2022 and 2023, Argentina faced a period of economic stagnation with one of the highest inflation rates in the world, rising 100% annually in some months. The complex macroeconomic situation was marked by a stagnant GDP growth, fiscal crisis, and difficulties in containing inflation through price controls and restrictive monetary policies. Economic and political uncertainty persisted, hindering investment and affecting citizens' purchasing power. Government efforts focused on containing fiscal imbalances and negotiation with international organizations, but a firm recovery was not achieved.
In 2024, Argentina's economy began to show signs of recovery. GDP growth rebounded to approximately 5.5%. Key factors contributing to this recovery include the lifting of capital controls, improved investor sentiment, and stabilization of inflation rate. The government implemented structural adjustments such as reducing energy subsidies and initiating fiscal reforms to address fiscal imbalances. Private consumption and investment picked up, supported by real wage growth and favorable financing conditions. However, challenges remain, including a high debt burden and the need for continued structural reforms to ensure stability and sustainable growth. For instance, in 2024, GDP grew by 5.5%, as I said.
2025 to September, the country continues to face an economic stagnation scenario with significant challenges regarding inflation, fiscal deficit, and growth. The current government seeks to implement strategies to balance social policies with the need for macroeconomic stabilization, but high inflation and structural vulnerabilities to continue to constrain recovery. The market distrust and elevated public debt remain central obstacles in the current economic landscape, while efforts are made to mitigate the social impact of prolonged crisis. Hi Tomás, how it's going?
Hi Celeste, everything's good.
Okay, have you heard about the latest news about Argentina's economy? They say they're really finally seeing results after the later adjustment.
Yes, I read about the government and they finally managed to stabilize the macroeconomic quite a bit. They lower inflation from 25% per month in 2023 to 2.4% on February 2025. That's a huge change.
Absolutely. And they also achieved a fiscal surplus of 1.6% of GDP. That means they're spending less than they collect, something that hasn't happened in a long time now.
Sure, although they achieved some, with considerable fiscal discipline and even by reducing some taxes, so now they depend more on the economic growth to collect that revenue.
Yes, speaking of growth, it seems to be going very well. GDP is expected to rise in 5.5% this year, with more consumption and investment than before.
That's also because they made the exchange market more flexible, and also they closed the dollar gap, eliminated part of the economy currency controls, and put in place the new monetary framework to control inflation.
And don't forget about the agreement with the IMF and loans from the World Bank and the IDB. Those funds gave them some breathing room to finance social measures and sustain growth.
Yes, they even increased benefits such as the universal child allowances to offset the impact of the adjustment but the most vulnerable sectors.
In short, it seems that Argentina is trying to balance the adjustment with social measures, seeking to stabilize the economy without leaving behind those most affected.
Exactly. If they manage to stay on this course, they could enter in a more stable and predictable growth phase. But of course, if there is still a long way to go.
Yes, perfect. I have to go. Bye.
Bye.